Hello, this is another edition of Video Patch Notes. Once again, I've got this lovely 7U case from MDLR, and I use it for live performance. And I just did a project called Sound Motion, and I have a different project coming up, so I'll need to unpatch this system and repatch it for the other project. They're probably going to be pretty similar, but there will be some differences. And so I'm making this video primarily so that I can have notes on this patch, but also just as a way, again, of hopefully contributing to a knowledge base and expanding what's possible. And maybe someone watching this will be inspired by these patches or will think of a way it could improve what they do. So here's what the system sounds like. It's two synth voices, a sampler, a percussion voice, and then also a effects loop for clarinet. So as far as disassembling it, let's start with the clarinet because that's sort of the least number of pieces. I've got a barrel that has a pickup in it. So instead of having to mic the clarinet, it's basically got a cable coming out of the clarinet that comes here to this Befaco instrument interface, and comes down here to this split, one side of which comes over to a sum. One side of the sum is the split, so it goes instrument interface split to the sum. The other side of the sum is the send from the console, and then they both go up to the input on the splash reverb, which then comes back out and goes directly into the mono return in the mixer. Mixer comes down here, goes out to a pair of DIs. Because the way it's set up, I can just basically use this gain knob as a bypass. So all the way down. Nothing happens. If I turn it up, you can hear that it's getting into that reverb buzz. So let's, starting there, get some of these cables out of the way. I think I said this in the last video. I love these tendrils. Okay. Oh, you know what? Let's do this. Let's unpatch that side of the split so you don't hear it every time the patch cable makes contact. Love these tendrils, except when it comes time to do this. And then I only like them instead of loving them. So over here, once again, we have a split. It's buffered multiple because it's audio. I probably could have gone with a passive split, but I'm just too much of an audio nerd to do that. Then this side of the split comes over here. We're going to leave the rest of that for a second. Oh, and then the other side of the split comes over to this gain tile, which allows me to roll off the gain, to adjust the gain, and then it would come out of here to a little 1/4 inch, so it's 3.5 millimeter to 1/4 inch, and then basically a one of those little iRig like guitar interfaces for mobile devices, which then went into my phone. So during the performance, I was cheating because I had my phone set to a tuner, but I could also just kind of monitor the pitch of the clarinet. Haven't done a lot of clarinet gigs lately, so I was cheating just to try and stay in tune. Okay, so there's that. Didn't really save us too terrible many cables. Let's do our percussion voice. So that is this noise source running into this filter, then over to a basically in a low pass gate. It's a VCA and a VCF. It's a low pass gate if you put an envelope into it. You can't ping it like a low pass gate. But this is one of my favorite modules. It always sounds super musical. Make Noise stopped making it. I'm not sure. Well, I'm sure they stopped making it for a good reason, but I feel bad for everybody who doesn't have one. So what's going on here? So I can slow down the noise until you can really hear the particles. It's going through this ADSR, but I've got it set up as a AD. And that's being triggered by channel 6. So like I have different presets within PAMs, this clock generator modulator, for different songs. So like in this one, it's a Euclidean pattern. I can just tell by listening. 16 steps, 9 fills at times 2. So it's eighth notes. And that's firing the envelope. The other part of this is I've got maths cycling over here. Let's speed it up a little bit so you can see it. And that's modulating the frequency. So I can change the frequency here, but also it also changes here. So maybe a little bit of that. It just puts a little motion in the percussion part. So that's really all this does. I think I had one patch where instead of doing a Euclidean pattern being fired by the envelope, it was like a ramp, like a riser patch. So let's get rid of Mr. Percussion here. Mr. Percussion sounds like some sort of goofy Simpsons bit. Though I don't know, maybe there's a Boss drum machine called Mr. Percussion. That sounds like a Boss drum machine. That's something Boss would name one of their drum machines. So that's the noise going into the filter. Here is... Sorry. Here's our LFO modulated cutoff. That's coming out. So again, this is going to be, well, maybe not as bad as it looks. It's not as bad as it looks. That should be the tagline for Tendrils. Buy these cables. It's not as bad as it looks. It's honestly this as chaotic as this looks. If you're using like normal straight patch cables, this would be a million times less navigable. So then our output is coming out of this Doepfer filter. I'm sure I mentioned that earlier in this. This is a filter that it's running through. That's how I'm actually carving out the sound. It maybe is obvious, but then we're going up to channel 1 of the Dynamics, okay, the the voltage controlled filter amplifier. And then we're controlling the level with the envelope here from this 2 HP ADSR, which I've had forever, and I always wind up patching it as an AD, and maybe someday I will actually buy an 2HP Attack Decay, but today's not that day. Okay, so next part of the equation. And I've unpatched too much of this already to do it, so sorry. So I'm also controlling it with a sample and hold. So we'll see how this works on this next part when I'm doing the sample playback. But basically, this is going into the sample and hold, and there's a trigger from the sample and hold coming from channel 8. And it's a trigger that happens every 8 bars. So every 8 bars, it samples the level of this knob. You can see right there, it changed, but it doesn't change right away. It waits till, not every 8 bars, sorry, every 2 bars. So you can see every couple of bars, it samples the new level and holds it. So I'm using this to turn it on and off, basically. Like I can set the level, and then every 2 bars, it actually arrives at that level and stays there. So like ahead of a transition, I can just turn it up, and then at that downbeat, it'll set that level. I'm doing that basically with both the percussion voice and the sample playback voice, because I'm also doing other stuff. I'm also playing clarinet. I don't have necessarily the bandwidth to set these at the right thing right on a downbeat. I want to set it ahead of time and have the system send that trigger every 2 bars. So if I have an 8-bar phrase and I start setting these in bar 6, whatever I set won't actually happen until bar 1 when the trigger comes through. So it's coming through this sample and hold. We've got a split going, so it's going somewhere else. So through this sample and hold, I'm getting the level here, and then it's sending that level over to the second voltage control amplifier filter. So this is what's actually shutting all the way on and off when I change this level. And then this finally, goes all the way out to channel 1 of the mixer. And you can see here I've got it going over to the delay a little bit. All right, so that's our percussion voice. Let's do... our subtractive voice. So that is Mutable Instruments Tides version 1, which is just a great sounding oscillator. Pretty straightforward. So I'm taking the square wave and then the bipolar and unipolar outputs up to this Eudaimonia Dreadbox filter that has a mixer in it. And then I'm taking also this envelope to the low pass for the filter. Comes out of that. I'm also using, there's an onboard VCA, so I'm using that for articulation. Then we're coming out, and I believe we're just going straight to channel 2. The only other thing that's really going on with this is I have a pulse width modulation. You can really hear it if we just go to the... And I've got this channel in the triplet, I think they changed the name of it when they reissued it, for a mount. I also have an LFO, so these two parts of the triplet are coming together. So, except the one on the right. B, C, D, E, F. No, that should be doing more than it is. Yeah, you can hear how it's ramping up. So that's our subtractive voice. It was mainly doing bass lines, and some of the songs it would start out as a lead and become a bass line. I think in one it never became to bass line. I actually managed to do bass line with rings. So let's and our PWM is coming from channel 1 of this. I think you saw it, but this peaks is what's controlling pulse width modulation. So a couple different things going on that allow me to shape the sound. But let's start disassembling. So I'm also getting volt per octave, so pitch information and gate information for the tides from channel 1 of the Metroplex. So our pitch, this is going to be a lot of fun because it is so spaghettied in here. Pitch is coming all the way down here. To the buffer multiple that's not very close to anything that's plugged into, but it's just kind of the way the ball bounced. I probably maybe could have moved it here, but then it just puts further away from the Metroplex. So it goes into this buffer multiple. One side goes up here to control the volt per octave tracking on the filter. Let's get you out of there. And then the other side is just going to the volt per octave input on the oscillator. Whew, this one is pretty gacked in. Let's see here. All right, so there goes our volt per octave information. Then I'm splitting gate. All right, because one side goes to channel 1 of maths. And then the other side goes to the function. So one of these triggers the envelope that's articulating the filter, which is this one. Then the other side is going to the envelope that's, this one is going to the envelope that's articulating volume. So this side was the filter, so it winds up coming back up here where it gets blended with the LFO that's coming over from PAMS. So in the case of the example we were listening to, it's that slow ramp. Let's get you out of here while we're at it. So yeah, like channel every 32 16th notes, that ramp reaches the top, so 8 bars. And then it goes from here, so combining an LFO and an envelope, and in whatever proportions I want to dial in on these two, it comes up to the low pass filter input. Okay, so we also have, this should be pretty easy, these three, which are the hot with the square wave, unipolar and bipolar output of tides are going into the 3 inputs on the mixer, built into the filter. We've got our VCA coming out of channel 1 of math, which was where one side of the triggers were being sent. And then audio out into channel 2 of the mixer. So that's our subtractive voice. Next, we've got mutable instrument rings, which is a pretty fun and unique module that is a resonator. It has multiple modes. And that's obviously going into the delay and into our reverb up here, the same reverb that the clarinet was going into. So I've got a couple things going on down here. One, the brightness of rings is being modulated by the same LFO that was modulating the cutoff of the percussion voice. So this LFO here additionally, the damping is being modulated by this LFO here. So I rarely had it cranked up that far, but it's just, when it's more responsible settings, it just animates these a little bit. I also have position being modulated by the second channel of peaks. So it just gives me modulation on all 3 of these parameters. It didn't modulate structure because it always gets real pitchy. It seems to get real pitchy when I do that. And then rings is just going straight into the mixer. So I'm not using anything to articulate it. You can do that, and I've had success running noise into it and then articulating it with the Dynamix. But without that, it gives it a pretty big contrast to the tides. So, again, we're going pitch information coming out of the Metropolix. This is not going to a multiple because I'm not running a filter on it. It's just coming straight down and going into volt per octave of rings. Then our gates, it's not 100% necessary. I'll be frank, I'm not super 100% understanding what strum does, because rings will strike a new note whenever it detects a new pitch. So how I'm using it, I think I just patch strum just because, I guess. In some cases, it may not re-trigger, so I just use that to make sure that every time I want it to send out a note, it does. It'll still do it when the pitch changes. So that's there more as a precautionary thing. Again, this guy is coming over. So channel 4, I took the mix out and then just gave it a little bit here, and then took the unity out down here for the percussion voice. So you can kind of mult your modulation output of maths like that. And here we're on this little cyclic skew, it's a little LFO. And then this guy is coming over from channel 2 of peaks. Channel 1 was going up here to do the slope, the pulse width modulation of tides. Then I've got my two outputs coming up here. I guess I can, leave that for a second. So that's that voice. I should not hear anything when I hit run. Okay. So I believe that leaves us a couple little things to tidy up. So channel 2 of mass is this smooth random. So channel 2 is attenuating it, and that's coming down here to the fall time of the filter. You see I don't have a lot of it. Again, it's just providing some very subtle variation to the decay, the fall time, to the ends of the notes. If you play a non-electronic instrument, you know that it's, unless you're playing, well, even with piano, to get the same decay, you'd essentially have to hit every note exactly the same force, which is impossible. So even the most consistent player on a non-electronic instrument is going to have a little bit of variation. So this is me just injecting some of that. It's every once in a while I would crank this to get it to talk a little more, but normally I'd have it down here where it's almost imperceptible differences. But again, you're hearing so many notes that if they're all exactly the same, your brain begins to check out on that part. So I just use it as a way of keeping things interesting. Or at it, channel 3 of maths is again, it was patch to patch. Actually, I think this was the same for everyone, but it's a 1 in 7 random. So you can kind of see here. It's sort of hard to tell because it's non-stepped random, but it's just picking random values. And then coming here to channel 3, and again, here it's modulating the fall time of this LFO. So if I crank up 3, you see now that our LFO becomes a little random on the fall time. Guess I could have done both. You see, it's just yeah, you can see it's changing rate. So this just gives me control over the random going into the ring's brightness and then the cutoff for the percussion voice. Same concept as this, just a little bit of variation so that you don't have the same cycle constantly happening. All right, that brings us to our sample voice. So I'll demonstrate this. I should have demonstrated it here, but this is on a sample and hold that happens every 2 bars. So you see, it doesn't happen right away. So that just allows me to set this and go do something else, like have 2 bars to set up a transition. So same thing for here. This wasn't necessarily on and off. This was how loud it was. So on some patches, like the riser, I had it all the way up. Most of the time it lived around here, but I could do that and it wouldn't turn off for 2 bars. Or I'd do this and it would wait 2 bars to go to that level. Now it's not an exact 2 bars from the event. It's every 2 bars within the cycle of 8 bars. So bar 1, bar 3, bar, is that right? We change on bar 1, bar 3, bar 5, and bar 7 So if you're at the end of bar 8 and you do something, it'll pick it up on bar 1. If you're at the beginning of bar 7, the same thing will happen. So it allowed me to, pick a new preset here, do a couple things, do this, and then boom, on the downbeat, all the changes would hit, because this generally does every 8 bars. So how that's achieved, we're taking the same clock cycle. So we'll go back over to it. It's 1, 8, 8, like is divided by 8. So it's a 16th note cycle. So that becomes 2 bars essentially. So up here to the trigger in, the sample is from here. So it doesn't pick up, you can see it won't pick up the change until this next trigger over here comes in. It's kind of the one part of the patch. The other part is the sampler here that I'm using to control the drums. It has, each song is in its own folder. You can have anything in the main directory of the SD card shows up, and then you can have one layer within that. So you can have folders within that top layer. And then within the folder, you can pick which sample you're playing based on this input. You can see it's changing colors, hopefully. But I'm not using that. I'm using this. So you can see it all, well, it doesn't change colors. Yeah, there it did. So this is which sample. So like to a certain point, it's the first sample, which is always, in every single one of them, the first sample was silence. So I effectively have a mute. Then somewhere, here's our first sample in the folder. Second sample, or sorry, first, second, third, fourth sample. The first sample is quiet, but it's still a sample, right? It's a sample of all zeros. So I'm using the sample and hold not only to turn it on and off, I'm using it to select which sample I'm using. So that's our sample and hold here. Again, we're taking this trigger from here once every 8 bars. And then it's going out here and selecting whichever sample's playing. Then I've got a clock here that just fires every 8 bars, which actually starts the sample. So that's the top of the form right there when the LFO goes high. So that's actually starting the clock, starting the sample, and if I have this sample at the same tempo, 127, as the system, they'll line up, or they'll line up for 8 bars. I don't think they'll line up indefinitely because you'll have 2 different clocks drifting, the clock in the DAW and this clock. But 8 bars is manageable. And then we just go out into the mixer. So I don't have too much left. This is, again, my triggers for my percussion voice. This is the clock for the delay. Let's start pulling some stuff out here. I have an LFO on the Excite on the reverb. And this is an attenuator for that because the reverb, this is not an attenuator, this is an offset. So that can come out. Again, this is my delay clock, which is trapped. We've got the outputs coming from the main outs of the mixer. If you heard all the noise, just go away. This is my sum, so this is the first send from the mixer, which was combined with that, and then it got sent up to the reverb. So our reverb coming back to the mono return. This is our echo effect coming out of the second aux out, aux 2. I just took a mono of that because I'm sending mono channels. And then it's coming back stereo here. Everything else is just, okay, so I've got the output of the clock. This just is normally a mult on this system. Just because, so I'll have an extra clock out if I need it. And then this is our run out, same deal. So I could theoretically take the clock pulses coming out of this and the run, the start stop pulses to something else. And then this just lives like this because this is a MIDI interface. I didn't use it in this patch, but I just left this in here. It may be coming out for the next one because I think I want to keep this, but I've got a distortion module I want to use. Anyway, that's it. Hopefully I didn't forget anything. I don't think I did because I don't see any more cables except for these guys, which aren't going anywhere. So thanks for watching. If you got questions, put them in the comments, and see you soon.